Hi all, I have another fascinating game of Raymond Kene, who really was a fan of Nimzovich and the hypermoderns generally, and we see this because he was also a great exponent of the modern defence. Now here is another game from the 1981 Lloyds Masters, which he won the whole event. In fact, it's a very prestigious event. This is against Sheila Jackson, one of the top women players at the time, and later became a women's grandmaster, represented Britain in many of the Olympiads, so a great player in her own right. So we see her playing e4, and we have this modern defence by Raymond Kene. d4, bishop g7, and now a slightly unusual g3. So it's interesting to see what should black really play against g3. Well, Raymond Kene chose d5. Now e5 was played, which does kind of weaken that f5 square. And here we see black playing as though it's like a French defence style position, c5, just trying to put pressure on d4 like this. c3, knight c6, bishop g2. And now fixing the centre, c takes d4, so reducing that central tension. C takes, and now queen b6, which seems to offer d5 by hitting d4. Knight e2 was played. If bishop takes d5, then one of black's better moves is knight takes d4, which undermines the e5 pawn. And this position looks as though white's got doubtful compensation. Black should be better there. Of course, in this position, not queen takes d4. That would set... that's a bad idea, because a bishop takes c6 is check, and then queen takes d4. So anyway, so knight e2 was played, protecting d4. We have bishop g4, and perhaps white should play a kind of defensive looking move, blocking in the bishop. I know it doesn't look too great, but for example, bishop d7, this position, there's pressure on d5, and things are getting back to normal. It should be about even. So if the bishop goes all the way back, again, it should be a fine position. White should actually be slightly better. So perhaps this wasn't the best move technically. Maybe f3 is better. Bishop takes e2. So volunteering again the light square bishop. So this is something which, if you look at the neural network games, Leela is often doing this and sort of celebrating the other colour complex quite a lot later. So here the dark squares, are they potentially crumbling? We have knight takes e2. If queen takes e2, then, for example, rook d8 is good, and white should only have a small edge here. On knight takes d4, this is interesting, but perhaps it's about equal as well. So knight takes e2, we have e6, white castles, knight ge7. This bishop isn't that happy in this position. It's only looking at d5. It's kind of blunted, really. We have b3. And white's kind of passive here, it seems, for that d4 pawn. So bishop b2, and now bishop h6, taking that diagonal as soon as that bishop went to b2. Bishop h3, rook ac8, f4. And it seems with the g6 pawn, there's a ready-made defense against f5 already, anyway. We have rook c7. Black has the luxury of doubling rooks here, which can cause all sorts of problems for white once this knight moves. That 7th rank here looks pretty dangerous. So white wanted to blunt that bishop looking at c1. But yeah, it looks as though black's position is easier to play right now. We have king h1, and the rooks just double. Yes, it seems white's pretty passive here with that bishop here. They're not really doing much. Queen d2, this is a bad mistake in the position, queen d2. Perhaps, and this looks a little bit awkward, rook f3 is the way to play this, to try and parry safely this c-file pressure like this. It's a pretty unusual maneuver, but maybe it's absolutely needed here. So white should, in fact, be okay, perhaps, with this type of position. Just getting rid of one pair of rooks and that strategic break f5, potentially not here at some point. So anyway, queen d2. So can you see what Raymond Kene played in this position? There's a great tactic here. So if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play with the black pieces? Okay, knight takes e5, so not pawn takes because the bishop takes, and white didn't try d takes. White played bishop c3, just losing a centre pawn really. If d takes, then the rooks come down, rook c2, and that's nasty. So for example here, rook takes e2, the queen is protected by the pawn, no problem. And in fact, the rooks are ready to double on the 7th rank and win more material. So yes, it's unfortunate, this move, but yeah, knight takes e5 is winning a pawn. Bishop c3 and a centre pawn. The knight just goes back to c6, b4, knight f5. And you see here actually, white is also kind of weak on these light squares, especially after b4. There's lots of weaknesses. And black's super solid. We have bishop takes f5, which kind of weakens white even further now on these light squares. After e takes, you can see that e4 and c4 are very useful to black strategically. a4, the knight actually reroutes knight b8. So it's rerouting here to go into e4, a very interesting strategic retreat. Rook ac1, knight d7. Even though black's only a pawn up, it's a massive position positionally. Here b5, okay, queen e6, and queen e4 looks like a nice thing as well. Potentially bishop a5. If rook fe1, then check and knight b6, and actually it's really annoying, this position for white. This knight's kind of stuck. If you look at this knight, it's stuck, can't really go anywhere. It's to attack the black queen. So for example, rook ed1, knight takes a4. What does white actually do here? If a5, knight c4, and this position is just a real nuisance. For example, like this is a total nuisance position where the knight's potentially coming into e3 like this, forking rooks, and if white doesn't parry knight e3 by challenging the queen, then knight e3 and knight g4 and this, and all of a sudden there's rook c3 on the horizon here. This is just devastating tactically, this kind of thing. And if queen takes, queen takes e2. So yeah, it's pretty nasty position. So bishop a5 was played. We have b6. Okay, a couple of rooks come off the board. Now knight f6. There's a mighty knight square now on e4. Bishop b2 and the rook comes to c4. Queen d1 protecting a4 technically, but it's such a miserable position now. Queen c8, so infiltrating via c2 is on the cards. The infiltration, white's very, very passive. It's been a complete success as far as the opening is concerned. Queen c4, it's total strategic domination. Nimzovich would be proud here. Rook e1, rook f2, which makes way for the queen to come to c2 to hit h2 even harder. So yes, white had to resign here. If white parries queen c2 with queen b1, then rook f1 check and taking the rook. If taking, then that's mate on f1. So and if knight a2, just to show queen c2, yeah, just gonna mate like this, for example. So the game ended here, and it made it look as though it's quite an easy to play recipe that Raymond Kene made use of in it seems many games in many of his best tournaments, just giving up the light square bishop, putting great pressure on the dark squares later. And in this game we also saw it wasn't just about d4 pressure, it's kind of the adjacent weaknesses on the light squares came alive in this game. So yeah, there's some very interesting positional undertones of this whole opening. So a fascinating opening. If you're really into your hypermodernists like Nimzovich, and you like the idea of attacking the centre like this, then these are kind of model games. Raymond Kene was a fantastic exponent of the modern defence. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to check out a modern defence course, check out Kingscrusher TV/modern-defence. That's the full-blown course recently at Chessable. There's also a free short and sweet version of that. Kingscrusher TV/modern. Okay, thanks very much.